Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series. Joining to talk about Arsenal transfers, ownership and winning trophies, because if there's one man that seems to know how to do it, it's Arsenal's owner, which is not a sentence I ever really thought I'd say with a straight face. I'm still not keeping a straight face, in fairness, but there is genuine evidence behind it now. To do so and talk about that and a lot more, I'm very happy to be joined back again after a small hiatus. It's John. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on. It's good to be back, and definitely a lot going on. So,
Yeah.
You know, blessings for you, man, for keeping this up.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it is a blessing and a curse, but no, it's fun. And to be fair, this morning we hit 34,000 subs, so thank you so much, guys, for helping support the channel as always. I'll talk a little bit more about that in tomorrow morning show, but a massive thank you. Apologies. Drew sends his apologies again that he can't be here, but he will be back. Fingers crossed next Monday. I'm trying to pin him down. I'm actually going to physically pin him down when I see him later this year, just to know that it's possible. But yeah, Drew should be back next week. But very happy to have you, John, on the show to have a chat about Arsenal and the ownership and how that might affect things in Arsenal in the long term. So let's kind of discuss what happened across the last 24 hours. Of course, the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. Now, I am what is it?
NHL.
That's the one. There we go. You see where I'm starting out already. You know, I'm no expert, very clearly. But this is obviously the second major US sports trophy that Stan Kroenke's teams have won in the last 6 months, with the LA Rams, of course, winning the Super Bowl back in, I think it was March, April time. And also, I suppose it's the third, because as you were educating me before we came on, the Colorado Mammoths in lacrosse.
Yep.
Which, you know, is a sport I think I played once in PE, you know, the sticks and the nets and the balls.
It's kind of like hockey, but on a field and
in the air. It seems
it's like hockey and football mixed together.
It's like, if hockey wasn't violent enough with massive wooden sticks, how can we make this more violent? Let's make them throw the ball in the air. Let's do that.
And tackle each other and hit each other.
Yeah, mental. Honestly, American sports are just crazy. But yeah, so three trophies, 3 wins in the space of 6 months is, you know, when we were thinking about Stan Kroenke, we always talked about silent Stan, has no ambition, no interest in winning. And, you know, under Arsenal, we've only won FA Cups during his tenure. You know, we haven't been able to push on to Premier League titles. And I'm not going to sit here and say all is forgiven, because it certainly isn't. But is there anything that I can take from these US successes to give me encouragement with Arsenal?
I mean, look, everyone at the time when Stan won the Super Bowl, everyone's like, this is not going to have any effect. And at that time I was saying, I don't think it's going to like spur him, you know, to start doing all sorts of different things potentially differently. I don't think it was going to be like a monumental shift, but winning is addictive for any kind of competitive person. And I'm projecting a little bit here as to, you know, I don't know Stan personally, but, you know, I can tell that he's a very ambitious person just by looking at, you know, Kroenke Holdings and looking at, you know, what he's done professionally. It seemed difficult for me to imagine a universe where that winning the Super Bowl for him didn't have some kind of a knock-on effect in the way that he approaches, from a sporting perspective, his other franchises. And I'm not going to say that is evidenced by the Avalanche also winning. It could be a causation or correlation thing. You know, just because he won both doesn't mean that one necessarily caused the other or precipitated it. And it also doesn't mean that if we therefore go on to win something significant, it's a result of winning the Super Bowl. It's going to be hard to make that. But it's also not difficult to conceive a world in which he has been motivated by the success with the Rams and now the success with the Avalanche to, you know, to show a little bit more enthusiasm for Arsenal. And I'm wondering if you could separate the kind of ambition that we've shown or seem to be showing in the transfer market now with pushing towards that goal. And even in the hiring of Arteta, if you want to go back even further, it could have been all part of one thing. But leave that to conspiracy theorists. I think that there's definitely an addiction when it comes to winning things, especially at that level. So we can only hope that, you know, we're next, right?
Yeah, I'm just putting a poll into the chat box to ask the question to kind of get a feeling from you guys as well. The question being, do you think that Stan Kroenke has the ambition to win big titles with Arsenal? Just to kind of get a feeling. It's not, do you think we will? It's just your personal opinion. So do let us know in the chat box. A massive thank you to Fort Lauderdale Craig for sending in a super chat. Greetings from John. Greetings, John, just from up the road in Fort Lauderdale. TC, hope you're doing well, my friend. Is that near Chicago or is that near Miami?
His heart's in the right place. It's I think Fort Lauderdale is north of Miami, so that was
right, of course,
where I was before I went to Chicago. So I'm in Chicago now.
Actually, I knew that because Inter Miami had to send players to Fort Lauderdale FC because they breached their salary cap, didn't they? I think with players they brought in. Well, so I actually did know where it was.
If you want to get really specific, actually, Inter Miami Stadium is in Fort Lauderdale.
Well,
so it's not even technically in Miami.
It's as close as it could possibly be. Let's get some more reaction from the chat box. Let's go to Harish, who says maybe the Super League also had an effect. One, the reality check on how fans are against the Kroenkes, and two, how far Arsenal were when compared to other teams that tried to be in the Super League. You know, Arsenal were one of the first teams, obviously, that pulled out of that. Not that it's any kind of recompense for them actually, getting involved with this. But Josh, I feel, has always been kind of at the forefront of Arsenal. You know, he's very much more involved with the Nuggets, to my understanding. That's kind of his baby, if you like, in the NBA. And Stan very much has got his kind of franchises where he's more invested in kind of personally with the Rams and the Avalanche. I suppose Josh is as well with the Avalanche too. I mean, he was, of course, at the game. There was the images that went up last night. We saw him there. And Stan was, of course, there as well. But, for Arsenal, it's almost been like Josh has taken on Arsenal as kind of his
pet
project.
Yeah,
in a way. Do you feel like that in any way kind of further detaches Stan from Arsenal?
I think necessarily it does, in the sense that if it were Stan and Josh wasn't in the picture, he'd be more directly involved, right? But I think that there's been some kind of a delegation to Josh. So by the mechanics of that, yeah, he's further apart from it. But I don't know if that necessarily means that it's to the detriment of Arsenal necessarily. But I think when you're making the calculations as to what his effect, on the Rams and the Avalanche versus his effect on Arsenal, I think that needs to be taken into consideration. That I definitely think Stan had a more hands-on approach when it came to the Rams than he did with Arsenal, which is more so that giving it to Josh to let him kind of to manage it. But that being said, you could see maybe why, if you look at what the Rams were doing. They had just built that new stadium. There's a lot more high level things going on with respect to the financial aspect of it, and more strategic from a sporting perspective going on with Arsenal with a new manager trying to change over from Emery and Arsene Wenger and all that stuff. So maybe that played into a part of it. I don't ever get the sense that Stan is really involved in the sporting side of any of his endeavors. I always imagine it's more on the business side of things. But you would
also,
hope,
I mean, the difference between Arsenal, of course, is they have experience in these American sports. The runnings of these, about how the actual sport itself works. That's not to downplay, American knowledge of English sports. It's just, of course, with their experience and their portfolio, it was much more attached to those sports. And then going in and buying Arsenal in 2007, when you've got someone like Arsene Wenger at the helm, who is in full control of everything that goes on, the test was always going to come when Arsene Wenger left.
Right.
And, that immediate test by appointing, with Ivan Gazidis, of course, moving on very swiftly as well, appointing Vinay Venkatesham, Edu coming in, Raul Sanyehi, of course, prior to that too. Sven Mislintat was there for a period. And they got the Emery appointment wrong. I think we all can see that now. We went backwards. By the time we sacked Emery, we were 8th. And by the time we'd appointed Arteta, we were 11th in the table. We were going backwards. They got that choice, that first choice, without Wenger there and his influence. We got the appointment wrong. Now, with Arteta, in my view, you look back at that with the benefit of hindsight and you would say that was such a risk. What kind of educated owner appoints to a club the size of Arsenal a manager with no prior experience of being at the top? But you'll be able to explain to me better. Don't they have a track record of appointing young, up-and-coming coaches to their teams?
They do, and I will, just about the Emery point, because I think it's an interesting one. I think there's also an argument to be made about, yes, the wrong appointment, but not for the reasons that people might think. I'm wondering. I see it as there was a culture problem at the club.
Yeah.
And I think they were trying to be filling a void where Arsene Wenger left in to make sure that we stayed in financially into the top competitions and things like that from a footballing perspective. I would imagine that when Arteta came in, and I don't have to guess. I mean, we know it from his first interview ever as manager's first press sitting was that he identified the problem, that there was a culture change that needed to change at Arsenal. And you can argue that they were right, obviously in hindsight, like the kind of entropic principle of this. The evidence is that it's here, that the culture seems to have changed. So yes, they do have a history of hiring these young managers. And I think that part of the approach that probably sold them so much was that culture change. And I think they probably prioritized that, seeing they had an experienced manager. Remember, their goal, and we talked about this when Emery was first appointed, what our goal was, and that I remember at the time seeing our easiest path back into the Champions League at that time was the Europa League, as evidenced by the fact that we almost made it because we made it to the final, and we had bought what I thought at the time was a specialist in getting into winning the Europa League with Emery, and he almost did it, and he's shown that he can kind of punch above his weight. So I think there's good arguments that it was the wrong appointment, but without getting lost too far in the weeds, I definitely agree with your position that that the Kroenkes definitely like to hire a younger manager. And there's this kind of overall younger feel about the club itself, like from the players that we're hiring, from the even I'm not in the stands, but from what I'm hearing is that there's kind of a younger atmosphere at the Emirates nowadays. So I think that aspect of it, including all these like kind of throwback kits, which you would say is kind of ironic because it's for like the older fans. The kids, like younger people like all the retro stuff. So
sure.
So I don't know. I think that we're starting to see a shift towards that, a kind of a younger team, younger manager, younger, and that's not out of their playbook. That's something that they do.
Michael says they failed the club year after year. I won't forget it, but I can support their approach they're showing now. And I think that this is where we start to talk about the difference between majority shareholding and full ownership of a team. And I think this is something that a lot of people struggle to not understand. I think that would be unfair, but kind of struggle to contextualize with the entire custodianship that the Kroenkes have had with Arsenal. Because when I have discussions with people that are very, very against the ownership, and Stan Kroenke in particular, and I say that I'm really judging them from the point of 2018 onwards and what they do from that perspective, because that's when they took full ownership. Because we're starting to see serious investment. You look at the amount of money that Arsenal was spending. This isn't the club's money. This is now their money. They've bought out the club. Anything the club spends is theirs. That's what happens. That's what happens when you own something. When you buy a business, that business is yours. If that business buys any equipment, any staff, it upgrades its infrastructure, you as the owner are spending money to do that because it is your business and you own it.
Yeah, and you're also not throwing money in the toilet. Like, you're acquiring assets, so the money doesn't evaporate; it just transfers from one thing to another. And people think, we spent $50 million on a player, and therefore we have $50 million less dollars. Well, no, we have a fluid asset that can go up or down in value, but it's still there, and you know what I mean. It's like it's an investment vehicle, and so are the players, and it's so dehumanizing to say that, but from a business perspective, which is what the Kroenkes look at it, that is a reality.
Well, is it just, we say that, of course, we say now that they're just looking at it from a business perspective, but when we consider the fact that their other franchises are winning, are they only looking at it from a business perspective?
And I'm sorry, I'm looking at it from the perspective of someone who's criticizing them for their past.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think the big kind of narrative around the Kroenkes has generally, from what I've seen, been that it's just about the bottom line. And I know because I've had that same thought about them. And I think what we've seen now with their other franchises as well as this one, is that there is a movement towards trying to achieve some kind of sporting success.
Yeah.
And they seem to be going about it the right way. Whether that actualizes depends on a lot of factors that they can't control. But they're certainly looking to remedy the issues that they have, at least from a squad building perspective right now in the summer.
Yeah, Keenan says once the Kroenke took full control, they started investing heavily and making decisive moves in the market, and we are finally buying players that are going to be worth more than what we pay for them.
So yes, in the summer market, let's not forget that we can go back to the winter market, and then I think you can make an argument that they were not decisive and that negatively affected us.
And they didn't really back Arteta in that. I say that in back, it's impossible to know without knowing categorically. Maybe the Amazon doc will give us some kind of inkling what happened in the winter window. It probably won't, but maybe it will, because in my mind, they clearly, like Arteta and Edu clearly wanted Vlahovic. Like we all know that.
Yeah.
And I feel like had Vlahovic been open to moving to Arsenal, which he wasn't, which is why Arsenal never bid for the player.
Mm-hmm.
If he'd have been open, I feel like we would have bid, because why on earth would we have been pushing to try and sign him? For me, the issues is that there were players that moved in January, like Bruno Guimaraes, who I feel like could have done a huge service to Arsenal, not just in those 6 months, but onwards, and would have been our centre midfield signing for the foreseeable future. And I don't know if I point the finger at Kroenke for that, and I point the finger more towards Arteta and Edu for January than I do the owners, because I feel like with the Vlahovic chase, if we have got the agreement, they would have invested in that player.
Yeah, I just think I agree. I agree that it's hard at least to know exactly where the buck lies with that. I will say though, and it's been kind of a ubiquitous position that the club had, that they really don't like the January transfer window, and they'll sign players if it's absolutely necessary or they're really XYZ justification. But my understanding, and that's historically the way it's been usually. Like sometimes we'll sign a player, but we never make or break a season based on our signings in January. And I feel like this was one time where they probably should have. That doesn't necessarily negate anything that Keenan is saying. I think that what we're seeing now, what I like, is before there were kind of like these obvious signings that we always needed to make, right? And we never seemed to do it. And we would sign these players that ended up working out partially because Wenger was able to put something together and had the team working so well and was so respected and knowledgeable about the game, especially in England. But now we're starting to see these younger, completely different profile of players. Every single player we're linked with now is this kind of this guy. This is such a great talent. There's so much potential. There's this, that, and the other. We seem to be investing more in potential now, which is something that we haven't done before. We'd get an experienced player here and there, or we'd get like these marquee signings because I think that's what we wanted. Ozil, Sanchez, those kind of players. We haven't been making those as much. I mean, you could argue maybe Gabriel Jesus, but
yeah,
and maybe Pepe at the time, but we saw how that turned out. But Partey, yeah. So we're definitely seem to be making more exciting signings. Does that make sense? And I don't know if it's a product of just the players that are available now versus when we were trying to sign players back then.
When we signed Ozil, that window was just Ozil. When we made that signing, that was £42 million. I think we brought in El Neni the January after that. That shows you how long he's been at the club. That's mad, isn't it?
It's wild. It's wild.
And then Alexis Sanchez, I'm just scrolling back through the years to see.
2014, we signed
2014, we signed Alexis Sanchez. We spent £100 million that summer on Sanchez, Chambers, Welbeck, Gabriel Paulista, Debussy.
So look, you see the Sanchez, you see that we had this marquee signing. We had Ozil. We get these big signings, but kind of
never built around them.
We figured.
But is that on the Kroenkes? Do you point the finger at them for that?
I point my finger at the Kroenkes for allowing that to happen. I get the logic in it, right? And I have the benefit of hindsight that I get to look at it and say, yeah, of course they're going to trust Arsene Wenger, and his decisions. He had full autonomy when it came to all of that stuff, right? They weren't even a full shareholder, so
exactly. That's the main thing. Yeah,
and that's. So I find it hard to kind of point the finger at them. But once they were able to take control over everything and make the decisions ultimately, I think that they didn't have the luxury of an Arsene Wenger. So they needed to be more smarter in the markets right now. And, it just so happens that we have this very suave guy in Edu who has this great connection with Brazilian players. And it just so happens to coexist at a time where there's some immense Brazilian talent. So sometimes you just have to get lucky. And, we've been in a position where we have been on the right end of that. And I'm hoping that that's starting to change. So that kind of spurred a whole bunch of conversations from that question. But ultimately, I wouldn't blame the Kroenkes for that.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm just typing in kind of whether the story around when Arsenal rejected Kroenke's offer to fund. There was an article by The Guardian in 2007. That's by Matt Scott, and the first line of it is Stan Kroenke has offered to underwrite a multi-million-pound transfer budget for Arsenal, but the club's directors are determined to go it alone.
Is that true?
This is what I'm reading. Arsenal's capacity to compete in the
Interesting.
transfer market has frequently been called into question, and uncertainty surrounds the position of the manager, Arsene Wenger, beyond the expiry of his 12-month contract, which in 2007, he only had a year left. With that in mind, Kroenke has suggested ploughing fresh funds into the club. It seems that the anxiety about Stan Kroenke and his intention has been well documented, said a source close to the American billionaire, but he'd like to support Arsenal. Hill Woods, the former chairman of Arsenal, said, "We don't need his money and we don't want his sort." But he accompanied Edelman to New York 11 days ago for the first face-to-face talks with the 12.19% shareholder since he raised his stake to that level in April. So this is where the conflict comes for me, is because it feels like there's been a willingness of the Kroenkes in the past to invest, and that we've always, all the we spend, you spend. My good friend Mo, of course, now who kind of led that whole, the net spend, the we spend, you spend situation, and you got those flyers together and stuff like that, along with a lot of other people as well that were involved too. It wasn't just Mo, but this idea that there was an unwillingness from the majority shareholders at the time to not spend. Perhaps that there is this misconception. Perhaps we have had a misconception about the ownership because they've not been technically the owners of the club. They've been majority shareholders. And when I have these discussions with people, I say, if you're a majority shareholder in something that you're not, you don't fully own it, can I really be critical of you choosing not to plow millions and millions and millions into something that you don't own? Because the evidence is, when you look at Arsenal since 2018, summer of 2018, first year that they had full ownership of the club. I can't remember the exact date that they took it over, but I think it was before the 2018 window. £72 million was spent. You fast forward to 2019, £144 million was spent. Go to 2020, another £77 million was spent. Fast forward to last summer, £150 million was spent. And you go to this summer, and it looks like we might break our spending record for the second year in a row. And this for me is the conflict with looking back with the benefit of hindsight and going, did they just not want to invest because they didn't have full control, or did they want to have some investment, but there was obstacles like the manager?
Can I add another layer to that?
Yeah.
What about considering what investing when you don't have full control actually meant in practice? That meant in practice investing money with someone like Alisher Usmanov
as a part shareholder.
Part shareholder. And we know that there was tension there between the two of them, and we know that Kroenke was never going to give it to them, give control of the club to him. And we know now, after everything that's going on in the world, probably why. So there's another layer to that, I think, as well. So 100% agree, by the way, that you're not going to invest heavily in something that you don't necessarily own if it's not, if everyone else isn't on board. I'm not, you know what I mean? I might give portions of it, but I'm not gonna be the driving force behind it. Especially if I'm not losing money on an investment, right? But once I own it, it's a different story. Once I know my money's not going into the pockets of someone like an Usmanov, who, clearly there was some animosity between him and Kroenke, which is arguably why he left. Usmanov left. I think that's another layer.
He knew he'd never be able to buy him out. That's why he went to Everton in the end.
He knew he never wanted to buy him out, but there was something about him. I remember him specifically saying he's never going to sell he's never going to give, majority ownership or sell the club to him. So
Yeah.
it wasn't just like, I'm not going to do it from a dollars and cents perspective. There seemed to have been a moral stance behind it one way or another.
Yeah.
So you could read between the lines there, but again, I think that it's also who would have been benefiting from that, and who did he want to do business with? And something tells me he didn't want to do business with Usmanov.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's interesting what kind of some of the fans think. Like we did with Ben yesterday, if you're listening to me and John and you're thinking, what on earth are these two prats talking about? Feel free to jump on, send us a DM, or you can come on the show and argue the opposite point. Let's tackle a couple of super chats as well. František says, I think people in the UK just do not realise how huge the Stanley Cup is as a trophy, because hockey is not seen as being so popular. It is the biggest ice hockey trophy that you can possibly win worldwide.
It's big.
So it's like the Champions League, basically, of hockey, effectively. The World Cup of hockey?
More, because there's only real one. You have like the Olympics, and then you have the NHL Stanley Cup. So you have less chances of winning major trophies worldwide in hockey than you do in football, because so major trophies. So I agree. He's right.
And Reggie, thank you as well. Thank you, František, as well for your donation. Reggie says, Tom, when I looked at the timeline, the better transfer decisions happened after Arteta was promoted to manager. Also, the Saliba debacle happened during the transition periods. That obviously happened under a previous regime. We've had people like Raul Sanllehi, who I cannot stand for some of the decisions that he made when at the club, that we are still reeling from, the Pepe situation, the uncertainty around the Saliba situation. Some of the signings that were made during that period just were not the right ones. He was involved heavily in the Willian situation. And Edu has definitely had to shoulder some of the blame, quite rightly, from the beginning of his tenure. And I have absolutely no qualms about people criticising some of the decisions that Edu and Arteta have made at the start of their tenure. But the difference between Edu and Arteta and what came before is I feel that they've learned from their mistakes. They've learned from what they did wrong, especially with the Willian and the Runnissons and the Pablo Maries and the Cedrics of this world. And, now they're looking at where they can get better signings and where they can spend money more sharply. And if they're going to spend a small amount of money, they do it on a player like Tavares, who they can make a profit on, or, Lukonga, they can make a profit on further down the line. And the players that they sign for the big monies, your Ben Whites, your Ramsdales, your Tommy Asu's, I say Tommy Asu's big money, but hardly was, Ødegaard as well. Players that come in and start and improve us. This summer, we're looking at Gabriel Jesus. For good. Like, when did we ever think we'd be signing, one of the main leading strikers for one of the teams that's winning the league coming into Arsenal? We may look at that, some people may look at that and say that he was a rotation option, didn't score enough goals. But I think in that Pep squad, it's very hard to nail down a starting place week in, week out. And he has an exceptionally good goal contribution record for the amount of starts he has.
Goal and assist, I think it's like 74 for 99 starts. Yeah,
I saw someone the other day saying he's only... Thierry was something like 0.91 goal contribution, something like that, and he's 0.90. Like, I can't remember the context around it, but I'll try and find it. It's mental, some of the numbers that he's put in. And, we're bringing in these types. And I put Lisandro Martinez as well on the thumbnail because, Arsenal today have submitted their second bids for him. They're going in for someone as good and highly rated as that. I don't think this bid will be enough. Who knows? There was some reports saying Arsenal were hopeful that they would accept it. I mean, I'm hopeful of grabbing a Ferrari one day, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Yes, you will.
Who knows? I've driven a Lamborghini around a track very slowly. That's what I've done. That's the closest I've got. I remember because the missus bought me that as kind of, one of those track driving experiences.
Yeah.
She was like, I was looking forward to taking a video of you driving a Lamborghini. But as you came around the corner, I realised that you went faster in your Corsa, so it wasn't really a good video. It was like someone doing like a lap baton behind a safety car. It was that slow. It was ridiculous. Let's jump into the chat a little bit more and tackle some more of these comments. Lynn says, plus, if you're not a full shareholder, if you have issues with your part owner, then he would be earning money at the expense of the Kroenkes. If you've got a part shareholder and you're investing into something, you're effectively investing in something that other people have an ownership in. You're kind of improving their kind of value of their shares in a way. There's a conflict of interest there that just doesn't sit well. And I think that's probably one of the big reasons. Igbo says, I agree with Tom. The Kroenkes should only be held accountable from 20. Now, I'm not quite on the line with this.
I don't think you said that.
No, I'm not saying they should only be held accountable from 2018. A lot of decisions that happened before 2018 from a non-monetary perspective, like the silence, the lack of communication with the fan base, the lack of clarity with the fan base, the lack of answers during periods of uncertainty, these things, we deserved more answers. We deserved more clarity. And I think that, they've definitely made an effort to step up significantly the communication, the connection with the fan base. And that's happened very recently with the introduction of the fan advisory board, with the 3 fan forums that are being done 3 times a year, with Josh being present for at least one of those, although I do feel that's something that could be better, and I think he could definitely be present for all 3 of them. I don't see why a 2-hour meeting 3 times a year, 6 hours out of an entire year, he couldn't be present for that, to be fair. But the one, we'll take it for now. That's kind of where I'm at. The Gooners Pod, our good friend Mike says, I've been screaming from the rooftops that the Kroenke's financial investment, or lack of it, should be judged only from 2018. And I think also, like, you look at the way we've spent money during that period from 2018 to now, I look more of it specifically kind of from when Arteta took over, John, at the club. But I can, and I use this example a lot, prior to Arteta taking over, I could probably count on my fingers the number of progressive signings we made from, say, 2007 through to 2019.
Yeah, and
since Arteta's taken over, the signings are, I'm really impressed with a lot of the signings that we're making.
And that's what I was saying before. It's like, and I remember me and Mike talked about that on his podcast a while back, and right when like Raul, all that stuff was happening. But yeah, I was saying it before. The signings used to be like 1 or 2 marquee signings, and then like a bunch of players that were decent enough. Never real like challenges to any particular position. It was more like squad players. And like you said, progressive signings. That's what we've been seeing now. That's a way better way of putting it. And I'm more excited about signings in each position now that we have, right? And seeing what they can do. And I think there's like the potential of these signings are higher than I've seen a sign in the history of us signing players in the last over a decade easy. So,
yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. We're going to be bringing in Isowa in a second because he had a different view, and I'm really interested to kind of hear the alternative perspective as well. So we'll be getting Isowa into the chat very, very shortly.
Nice.
Sko says the recruitment strategy since Edu and Arteta has been cohesive and exciting. Not just age, but specific skills for roles like bringing in forwards from renowned pressing teams. It's smart. And also we've got so many more leaders in the squad than we ever had before.
And versatility too. What I'm noticing about a lot of these signings is that each player, it's like this player can play multiple different roles, which is, like Pep trademark, to have this kind of this like a forward total football where players can swap interchangeably on the pitch and play, with some kind of, reasonableness. So that's exciting for me too. We haven't had that in a while.
No, we haven't. We're seeing some serious investment in the chat box today, which is great. Tom Stambol says, I'm willing to give KSE a chance based on recent successes in the US and involvement, but it needs to be more. They are used to a different system in US sports and only recently have had success. I think that's been the back end of a process, though. Is that right?
It has.
Years of building.
It has. And, I think maybe we need to start reassessing this notion about American involvement in British sport. You look at Liverpool's ownership group. You look at now Chelsea's ownership group. Yeah. You look at Arsenal's ownership group.
Manchester United aren't the best example, though, are they? But yeah, I know what you're saying about Liverpool, yeah.
Liverpool, yeah. But, and we'll see what happens with Chelsea, obviously. But, it's definitely the new market. And that was kind of a natural progression. That was always going to happen, right? Like Americans were like, that's the European sport over there. We got football, we got NBA, and we got baseball and hockey. But now they're starting to realize, what? There's money in this. Like there's some serious money getting thrown around the Premier League, especially after the rights and the TV deals. So if you win, there's even more money. Now they're starting to realize Champions League, there's a lot of money. $100 million for winning that. That's not something to shake your nose at. So
let's bring in Isowa to the conversation. How you doing, mate? You good? You well? Enjoying yourself?
How are you guys? How are you doing? Everything well?
Thank you. Very good indeed. I want to address, of course, you commented in the chat box, and it's great to have you on the channel. So this is the definition of clutching at straws. I love you. Yeah, straight to the point. It's just Arsenal is just a franchise in a conglomerate sports entertainment company. You've been listening to what me and John have had to say, so kind of give me where your head's at.
Yeah, basically, the idea that we're softening towards KC, Kroenke Sports Entertainment Group, I don't really find it. Evidence will show maybe in the future or currently what we're doing in the transfer market. But for me, I don't see it as a time to be positive or show some affinity towards what they're trying to do. I don't, since the time that Josh Kroenke said be excited, I don't see anything that we can. I don't see evidence that suggests that we should be excited about what's happening right now in the transfer market and the way that Arsenal are handling themselves. I mean, since if we're trying to judge, I mean, Mike said it from the Gooner Pod. We should be judging them since 2018 and 2018 forward. We cannot, but they had plenty of times, like since they were the majority shareholders, I think so, since 2015 maybe, right? When they had 60%.
No, not from 2007, but 2000. Well, they've been involved in the club since 2007, but I don't know. I can't remember exactly. I'll
there was
find
a
out for
specific
you while you
point.
can.
Yeah, there's a specific point or a stage in which one of the seasons that they became majority shareholders when they passed the threshold of 60%. So that's, I think, so the point that they became
2011.
2011, yeah, 2011.
So they had, I think so. I don't know much about business. We should be calling Mo or the other Mo. So to know more about what's the threshold of when you become a majority shareholder, how much percentage do you need, where you can act as basically the de facto owner of the club, or you just need other participants to approve or dissent. I don't know exactly the grit and the grind of the business world, but don't mistake Kroenke as some guy like Abramovich that only spends on the negative and the red just to see the club win. This guy is a person. He's a businessman. It's America, baby. It's all about it's all about money. Money is, you live by money, you die by money. It's it's not about I love the club, I'm a childhood fan. No, the Kroenkes don't believe in that. They're savvy businessmen. They're sharp. They love business. They're born into. I mean, his wife is the heiress of Walmart. Yeah. So it's all about business. It's all about takeovers. It's all about railroading the other person. It's not about affinity of the club. If we were owners, like for example, I don't know if he's a real true fan, the Spotify owner Daniel Ek, we would be more in that style of owning a club, Abramovich, where we can go into the negative and still dole out money for the club. But the Kroenkes, they
well, we are in the negative right now, are we not?
Yeah.
I thought we've been making loss after loss after loss, and yet you're still seeing us spend significantly.
Yeah, and also just you're making some good points, but I would bring up that there is an incentive to win in the Premier League and to be in the Champions League. So there, from a purely dollars and cents standpoint. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that the Kroenkes are these robotic capitalist owners that just crunch the numbers. There's still an incentive for them to invest to see a greater return than, they can't just not sign players, and they can't constantly stay in the red. So, being out of the Champions League for so long affects the bottom line one way or another. And I think, the push that we're seeing, even if you believe that they're just these robotic capitalist owners, are to achieve sporting success in some form or another.
Fair point. But then what happened when we only signed Peter Cech when they were the majority shareholders?
I think this kind of comes back to that point, though, about what me and John were discussing, that if you're the majority shareholder, I get what you said about the de facto owner, and I think the argument would be 50.1% of something. If you own that, then technically you're the de facto owner. But I don't know.
I can say at least that 62.89% was enough to be the majority shareholder, which is what he held in 2011.
Yeah. And I think that for me, and I think Mike put this, and Mike's going to be coming onto the channel in very shortly as well, because he can obviously put across this a lot better than I can. But in regards to kind of what you can do as majority shareholder versus what you should do or what's to the benefit. You just said there obviously money is king, and if you're going to invest, say, £100 in something, but it makes your competitor, who's another shareholder in the company, £40 richer, why is that going to benefit you in any way? Surely it would be better for you to try and accomplish entire ownership on something, before, from a business perspective, you then go in and start investing to try and succeed. Do you know where I'm coming from, Asawa?
Yes, it does not make sense if you have 60% of a company that you won't spend all your money on a company that you own 60% of. It won't make sense until you probably need 100% of the company to assure yourself that you're going to be spending the money from your own pocket. But have we really seen the Kroenke spend from their own pocket? I think so. There was an argument in your channel.
Yes.
It always comes back to 2018. But I need to really do my research. I'm not really talking analytically right now. I'm talking based on my own opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I need to really go and crunch the numbers, because there was an argument I heard on the Arsenal Lounge between Mike and Mo about. Mo was in the sense that saying no, they did not net spending wise, they didn't spend any since 2018 or 11, any of those years. They didn't spend anything. It's all from the Arsenal, the company, the PLC. It never came from their own pocket, except for the fact, I think so, they refinanced when we're going through the coronavirus stage, they refinanced some of the loans and stuff like that. That's why we had some flexibility in terms of the cash.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Yeah, what?
I was going to say that's an interesting point you're making. I've heard this a lot. This notion of dipping into the pockets, right? I always wonder if the right amount of money is being spent on the right players. Does it matter if it's coming like from your perspective? And obviously, you have to look at the analytics and stuff. But from your opinion, does it matter to you really if it comes out of the pocket or out of the PLC if the right signings are getting done and the money is being spent?
Yeah, that's a good question. If the right signings are done, then I don't really care about who spends money. But then they're the custodians of the club, and they reflect upon the club. Or we as Arsenal fans pride ourselves as classy and all those nice jazzy words.
All of us.
The custodians are some people that you wouldn't like have a drink with or something. I don't know, or go out on a night out. You want your club to be represented in the best light, right? And the people who are in the top tier right now are the custodians of Arsenal. Arsenal does not belong to the Kroenkes. It's merely just they're the custodians in this point of time. And that's what I'm trying to get across. The Kroenkes happen to own the club right now, but it's not theirs. It's for the fans. And I feel like
That for me is always going to be the stumbling block, I think, for a lot of supporters, you point out, because obviously for so long Arsenal was owned by so many supporters because it was all done in shares. Right. So when Arsenal were bought out by the Kroenkes, that action, no matter what they would have done afterwards, for so many people was always going to be seen as a terrible thing because of the way that Arsenal had been owned prior to 2018. Let's bring in Mike to the conversation. Mike, I know you've been sitting and listening and waiting patiently. Tell me how kind of you're feeling. You're listening to us obviously talk about this from the perspective, and I think it's a fair perspective to come from as well about concerns and worries. And you, of course, had that conversation with Mo on the Arsenal Lounge about this. So talk me through kind of your frustration, I think, about how the Kroenkes are viewed and what's fair and what's not fair in terms of criticism.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom, and first of all, hello, Asawa. Is it Asawa? And John, I've missed you. Interesting question. Oh, jeez, my watch thinks I'm asking questions.
That's an interesting.
It is an interesting question.
That was my Apple Watch. Sorry, I did not invite her onto the podcast. So yeah, my bat signal went off. You guys are talking about finances and Kroenke. So it's literally my favorite subject to talk about. So thanks for reaching out. I've said for a long time that if you had a list of reasons to hate KSE and the Kroenke family and the entire, the list could be as long as the Bible. But the one thing I wouldn't put on that list is that they're just cheap and have no interest in winning. There's so much, there's so much out there. The misconstrued comment about not buying Arsenal to win trophies that was taken way out of context. Some of the things he said in his 2019 interview that were spun completely out of context. But then, of course, they keep shooting themselves in the feet by saying these things and by being absentee owners and not, and showing up to an Arsenal training in a Rams shirt. They don't help themselves. So there's a lot of things that for a sport, unlike any of the other sports, that they own clubs and teams and franchises in, depending on what you want to call them in the various sports. They have struggled in the public relations department and doing all the right things for a proud football club such as Arsenal. And they have not been good custodians of the club in that way. But the thing that just gets me though is when people really just have an agenda, and I'm not talking about any of the three of you, or opinions are all fine, but when people just want to believe the worst about somebody because they don't like what's happened to their football club and start shoveling just factually wrong stuff and incorrect stuff one of the things that, like I said in the chat, that gets to me is the investment before 2018. Control and financial control and financial, like reasonability of doing what people wanted us to do in 2012 to 2018 are different things.
Mm-hmm.
Stan Kroenke's controlled everything that happens by being the majority shareholder and the chairman of the board since 2011, like John said. But what you didn't see with Chelsea, owned by Roman, what you didn't see by City, owned by the Abu Dhabi group, what you haven't seen in Liverpool once FSG took over for the Gillette Hicks group, or even in Manchester United, is a battle for the ownership of the club. I was going to say hearts and minds, but it's really just a battle for the club's property and the ability to run it the way they wanted to. Usmanov didn't sell his shares. He fancied being the 100% owner, even when he was the 30% owner, to the point where he made offers to Kroenke to buy him out when Kroenke was the majority owner. So this team was embroiled in an ownership battle happening at the exact same time that we essentially had just moved in and were getting used to being in the Emirates with all the stadium debt for that. And I just don't think that gets enough focus because, when you own 60%, and I'm kind of repeating some of the things I put in the chat, when you own 60 or 70% of a company and you're fighting the person that owns 30 for the value of the company, you want to buy them out at the least amount you possibly can, but you don't want to destroy the value of the company and take over a failing company. You're going to try to tread water as long as you can.
And you're definitely not going to invest into your opponent's pocket.
I think they realize. Well, you're not going to invest into your corporate opponent's pocket, no, and you're also you're going to try to find. I mean, there is some truth, a lot of truth to Arsenal sees fourth place as a trophy and is just happy to finish in fourth place from the years 2012, maybe even 2008 to 2018. There's a lot of truth in that. We acted that way. We accomplished exactly that. And frankly, we were lucky to. But the problem is that those guys were at each other for the ownership of the club. And the one thing that I believe that they had in common that they could agree on is that Arsene Wenger was doing a very good job of getting that Champions League money and not having to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds to do it. Whatever he was doing was working. So he consolidated more and more and more power under Arsene Wenger, which was seemed like a great idea in 2011, 2012, off the heels of what he had done 5 years earlier. Didn't seem like such a great idea in 2015 when he just bought Petr Cech. Didn't seem like such a good idea when he and Gazidis conspired to give silly money to players that ultimately we've only now just got out from under. But that's what they did. They took their eyes off the ball, and just like Hicks and not Hicks. Who's the guy from FSG from Liverpool? John Henry,
the Red Sox guy.
John Henry. John Henry doesn't know shit about football, about proper football, but he did get the right people in place and had checks and balances on them to make sure that they were doing their jobs. We got a person in place that used to be the right person, gave them way too much power with almost no checks and balances to it. And by the time anybody realized that that for lack of a better analogy that I use all the time, by the time anyone figured out that the foundation was completely rotten, it was way, way far gone. And it was always going to be a 4 or 5 year process. And, and COVID and missing the Champions League have cost us 8-figure losses, £107 million loss last year. It's going to be another one this year, 4 straight years. not that bad, but it's going to be negative. And that's where the Kroenkes have had to invest, is in covering those losses.
Well, what do you make of what Mike's had to say there?
So yeah, I'm gonna trust you on that, and I'm gonna do my own research regarding what payments that they had to cover for the Kroenkes for the times we had to struggle out of Europe, and when we got hit badly, everyone got hit badly by the coronavirus. But then, yeah, as you said, John Henry might not know anything about football, but then he had Michael Edwards, I think so, the sporting director there, that was the vocal point in getting Salah and getting Mane and Firmino and that core. But then also, if you think about it, the old guard, the executive old guard that we had, that was Arsene Wenger, Gazidis, and Chips Keswick, right? That was the old guard that was introduced to Mr. Kroenke, and that's who he had to deal with at that time. And I'm pretty sure that they were cozying up to him and trying to help, maybe consolidate, as you said, the power to Arsene Wenger and tell him that we're under this amount of debt, we just moved into a new stadium. And that was the vocal point in which he gave the consolidation, gave all the power to Arsene Wenger. But then again, Arsene Wenger, can we only blame Arsene Wenger?
No. You can blame Stan Kroenke and Usmanov for allowing the club to essentially be run by 1.5 people. I'll give this a half.
Yeah, I don't think, Mike, you're not saying that like Kroenke has ever come into this with clean hands. But
no.
You're just saying, you're just saying that all the being a lightning rod for everything, especially when people are misrepresenting maybe the reality of the situation at the time and now. Is
lack of attention. He got and by he I mean Stan, because it's really only been Josh over the last 4 or 5 years. Stan got very comfortable with what we were doing in the 2010s, which was finding a way of getting into the Champions League elimination stages, not even just the Champions League. Balancing books. 2009 to 2014, we were running profits every single year.
It must have been great. From a business perspective, you don't have to deal with anything. You just like leave it there.
The struggle for me, Mike, the struggle for me during that period is, and I think you're fair to raise the point that they were comfortable and we were doing that. But having now, with the benefit of hindsight, knowing what's happened between 2018 and now they've got the full ownership, and now we're seeing the big money come in. And there's this argument that why would they invest if they didn't have full ownership in something? What level of criticism can you legitimately point towards the ownership during that period for not investing? Or is it specifically or for allowing certain decisions to be made that they should have been stronger to stop happening?
What level of criticism in that like 2008 to 2018 timeframe for not investing?
Yeah, so during that period, like we didn't invest. The club didn't. The ownership, there was no money put in.
We were selling our best players once a year.
We spent what we made. That was only what we did. We spent the money that the club was making off revenue and player sales, etc.
And that was under the direction of Arsene Wenger. That was the model Arsene Wenger was operating.
That's what he wanted to run.
That was the mandate that he do that, and he pulled it off had we missed the Champions League in say 2013? We didn't miss it. We'd be sitting in a very different situation right now, because we more than likely would have escalated our, we would have sold more players at that point to try to keep the books even. That would have been an absolute disaster. So I will say the one thing that, even though he was kind of not building a good foundation for the future, the fact that he kept us in the Champions League every year with those rosters and with the need that we had to be in that competition was both a little bit lucky in the sense that that the top four hadn't completely become a top 6 or 7 yet, but like he did a damn good job of doing that. So good, in fact, that I think the Kroenkes just basically took their eye off the ball and said, well, we can count on this continuing forever. And then when it didn't, they were like, damn it, we are screwed.
The problem, I think, was when we needed to push it to the next level. It became clear that just getting fourth wasn't good enough. Winning the FA Cup here and there, that we saw rivals strengthening. That's where I think the issue came in. And then in order to make that next jump, there needed to be some kind of a culture change. But this has been the culture for so long. It was fourth is good enough. Champions League is good enough. We did that. That's our goal. We won the FA Cup here and there. So once,
ironically, that's what a lot of clubs are aspiring to now, and coming out loud and saying it.
Right. But and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. But when you want to challenge for major trophies, when you actually want to not get knocked out by Bayern in the first round of 16 every single year, or Barcelona, that is when the culture needed to change. But it had been imbued for so long that this fourth was good enough, that I think that it became very difficult to change that. And that's why me and Tom were talking about earlier about how Emery wasn't the person to do that, but then they brought in Arteta. But that's a whole nother.
Well, but that's what they're trying to do now is build something that can. I mean, I can't say it enough. I said, I sprinkled it throughout my financial show that went on yesterday or the day before, but like we are following the Liverpool model.
Yeah, of course.
With the goal of doing what Liverpool has done and is still doing, which is raising the profile of players that we can sell to continue that churn of actually bringing in money on sales, which we are probably over the next year or two on the verge of being able to do, instead of giving away all of our dead players. Mm-hmm. Bringing in people who just want to be part of Liverpool and they'll and not necessarily shop around for the best offer. The main difference is that they invested in a coach who been there, done it, and has only gotten better since he got there. Arsenal's decided to go for kind of the unproven, hopefully future master who sat at the knee of one of those guys. That's a risk that's being taken, but Liverpool, there's a reason Liverpool only barely won the Premier League once and almost won it another couple times, but really, and that's because Manchester City is just cheating. I mean, they are, and they will continue. I mean, these new rules may have an impact, but probably not. It may even make it easier for them, but like in so many different ways, they have just basically, there's no reason they should ever lose the Premier League title as long as the rules are the way that they are. And while we should be able to compete for it, I think we look at Liverpool's ceiling over the last 4 years where they're competing for it almost every year. They got it one year. They had a bit of bad luck and didn't get it another year, but they've been going to the final, 4, 2, and 1 of the Champions League every year because they're a team that on their day can't be beat by just about anybody. That's what I think we are aspiring to, and as an Arsenal supporter in today's game, where money is king, and ridiculous money is super king, I think that's about the best we can hope for. Super king.
But we cannot.
I would just add that one difference between us and Liverpool is that we are definitely emphasizing more on our youth Haaland people than Liverpool did during their kind of rise from buying these unknown players like Van Dijk after selling Coutinho, stuff like that.
They sell better than we have.
They sell better than we do, but we seem to grow our youth players better than theirs, at least during that period of their ascension, which is good for us.
And that bodes well. I mean, we have dug a massive hole for ourselves, but the thing that a lot of Arsenal fans aren't patient enough to view is that it's such a lagging indicator. The things, especially when you throw COVID in there, to recover from what we built, what we put ourselves into from 2012 to 2018 was always going to take 4 or 5 years. And if we tried to fix it all in 1 or 2 years,
it was impossible.
We might have been able to experience better results in those 2 years at the expense of starting that same loop all over again. And what KSE has basically done, it seems, is says we are now going to try to put the club in the right hands. They thought that Emery, Senyehi, and Edu were going to be those guys. Now they're banking on Edu and Arteta, and maybe we don't know, Tim Lewis, Dick Arlick, those guys. Being the.
I was like, who's that? And I realized you meant Richard Garlick. Yeah, go on.
But if I'm given the choice, I have to call him that.
Yeah, of course.
But if they've got the team right finally, like Liverpool's team finally got right, then I think they're doing all the right things to put us in a position to win. And then all you have to do is actually just go out and do it.
Yeah, but
Liverpool.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on. I was going to say, make your final point, because I've got a next caller to come on very shortly, but I don't want to leave you because I know you had something to say. So
I had a bunch of thoughts. Liverpool basically are trying to catch up with Chelsea and City, but they are doing it in a more focused and targeted approach. But they're also blowing a lot of money. Not all the signings they're going to make, like Nunes and Diaz and Jota. Jota works for now. He's a good player. But not all the players that they're going to be spending a lot of money on are going to be success like what they had with Mane and Firmino and Salah on the cheap. Now you're seeing the amount of money that they're spending on the players that they're getting right now. It's not the same that they got, because now the profile is higher, their wage is higher, and they're a more proven club, on the stage. When they got Mane, they didn't expect him to become this player. When they got Salah, they didn't expect him to become this player. But they got him on the cheap relatively, and they became superstars. But on the point of the Kroenkes, because now
I don't think that's an accident, though. So that wasn't. I mean, they didn't stumble upon that. They took some chances. I mean, they took some chances that didn't pan out as well. Andy Carroll and so on.
Yeah,
but Suarez and Mane and Salah, those were. And I'm not comparing the players, but those were Lisandro Martinez, Fabio Vieira, Thomas Partey type moves, and some of them are going to pan out great. And so, I mean, we got Gabriel for 24 million. We got, I mean, those are the same kind of moves that we're making now, I think. And if they pan out for us, as well as those moves panned out for Liverpool.
Well, I hope so to pan out for us as better than them, of course. But then again, with the Kroenkes, they don't have a proven track record with the fans. St. Louis Rams, we all know what happened with that when they relocated. They're getting sued.
Great reason to hate them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
my daughter goes to school in Missouri, and Josh Kroenke went to her university, and they are so hated there. Like I said at the top, there are a lot of good reasons for a lot of various people to not like these guys.
Yeah. I mean,
my role is not to be a Yank defending a Yank, like someone said in the chat, but to simply just distinguish between, the one thing that they are trying to do, because for their own selfish purposes, they want to win. They want to win. They want to make money winning.
Who knew these multi-billionaires were unlikable?
Sorry, they are very savvy businessmen. I mean, I'm seeing this type of conversation, and I know people are willing to give them credit right now because they're doing some type of moves. But I am not willing to go all the way there where I'm going to give them full credit. I might give them like 10%, 5% for doing their job as owners. But they're ruthless. What they did to St. Louis is documented. I mean, right now, the NFL lost a lawsuit against the city of St. Louis because of what happened.
No, they're not nice. They're not nice guys. They're not. I bet them.
We've got another caller coming on now, and I know that we've had a lot of time, and he's been sitting very patiently. And I think actually maybe Isoa's connection may have just gone, so it might be good timing. But if you can hear me, a massive thank you, Isoa, for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure he's listening to us whilst he can't necessarily see us right now. Let's bring in Jay to the conversation. Jay, thank you for coming on the show. Really appreciate you jumping on with us. You seem passionate to talk about this topic. Tell me what it is that you want to raise in the conversation.
So, Tom, I've been hearing you guys since the last, let's say half an hour. And I think my points are a little different. In terms of what I'm trying to say is that since the Kroenkes have gotten hold of our club, I think it was 2018 when they took full ownership, right? 2018 or 2017, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And 2018 was the summer was the first summer where we got Perechek, right? That was
15 or 16.
15, 16 was
okay, I'm
the year Leicester won the league.
My dates here, but I think the first summer they came in, they didn't do much. The first summer that they got the club, they weren't really active. But then the next summer they went and got Nicolas Pepe and a few more transfers in. With I think this was the same summer.
So 2018, just for clarity, we spent 72 million on Lucas Torreira, Leno, Socrates, Matteo Guendouzi, Stefan Lichtsteiner, and then
Unai Emery.
And Unai Emery, yeah. And that following summer in 2019, we spent 144 million on Pepe, Saliba, Tierney, Luiz, and Martinelli and Ceballos on loan. So that's what we did.
So that's exactly my point. That since they've got full ownership of the club, they've been spending every summer, as we can see this summer as well. Fabio Vieira has done. Gabriel Jesus looks like he's on the verge of completion, and we're going for Rafinha, who, funnily enough, is one of my favorite players. Like I was to watch Leeds to watch Rafinha because I really like Brazilian.
Nice.
So I'm happy about that. I think we're building like some kind of a samba squad over here at the Emirates. Yeah, and I see, have you seen that meme on Twitter, the one with the Arsenal logo in the Brazil?
Yeah, I have seen that. Yeah.
But yeah, I think obviously Edu's connections are playing a part in this, and we're building some sort of Brazilian. But I think I like that Brazilian.
Which is better, Jai, the Samba squad or the English core or the British core that we have?
It was called the Brexit squad the other day to me. Someone called it the Brexit squad. So
I like the Samba squad. I
think it's a mixture of both the Samba and the English core. You know what I'm saying?
I just got this picture of like Kieran Tierney or doing like the samba now and
John, what was that?
That's the samba.
Is this your samba?
His Tesco bag, his Tesco bag dancing with Martinelli.
So Jay, in terms of like where specifically, because I want to get to the kind of the point, what's the targeted kind of thought around the owners for you? Like, are you happy now with the Kroenkes to see them spending,
I think it's very subjective, but I feel like the way they're going this summer, the ambition I'm seeing this summer, I'm happy with that ambition. I'm happy with that step forward. This was Arsenal of the old. We'd be like, we lay back and just enjoy ourselves and wait till the last day of the window where we go and do 5 deals. You know what I'm saying? Panic and buy 5 players. But no, here we go. Like, Fabio Vieira done, Marquinhos done, Gabriel Jesus before preseason starts done. Let's do it. Go Rafinha, Lisandro Martinez. Come on.
That's the thing that's more. That's what I like. More important to me than the spending amount is the
exactly. I don't care about the money. Sometimes you can get good players for 20 million as well, like Gabriel, as you mentioned. You can get Gabriel for 20 million. We got Martinelli for what, 8 million or 6 million? Yeah, 5 million. Yeah. And what would he be worth today? 40-50 million easy, I would say.
Without a doubt, yeah, easily.
Yeah, to me, the biggest difference of this summer is the speed. It's almost like they had their eyes on players in January, but just weren't in a place to buy them yet. And now,
I think it was the finances in January because we spent a lot last summer, right? So I think they didn't have the FFP limits. That's my personal opinion to buy in January. And the financial year just finished in April, right? So
Me and John are like,
well, no. I mean, it's reasonable to think that
they could up January personally.
They could have spent in January, but they didn't want to spend on the wrong people in January because they knew.
That's right. They spent a lot of time.
And I think they didn't want to spend in a rush as well. Yeah. I think they didn't want to spend in a rush. I think they didn't want to go for someone who they didn't think was suited. Like guys like Morata were available in January. I think. I don't think they really wanted.
But I look at someone like Bruno Guimaraes, and I'm like, why didn't we go for someone like
loan? Get a friggin' loan.
No, but John, when you say go get a loan, but then you're like short-term fixes. When they brought in Ceballos,
we just needed a short-term fix. I think we missed out by 1 or 2 games.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. When you look at it from hindsight, you feel like, we missed out by 1 or 2.
Well, we could. I don't know if it's necessarily high. That's a different conversation, and we can have that one. But I mean, I can tell you, I was there. I was on the record back then saying I remember we had Mike right around the time it was like one of those Twitter things where you can like the spaces where everyone could talk on Twitter. Is that what it's called? Whatever it was. Yeah. And I was waxing poetic about how I saw, if we just miss out by 1 or 2 games because, one of our strikers that, can't find some form or gets injured or something, and then we're spending the rest of the anyway. I think it was more than hindsight.
I feel like you made a prediction, right? And even I wasn't happy in January when we didn't sign anyone. But I feel like they were like, if we don't get Vlahovic, we're getting no one. We'll go in the summer again. I feel like they were so focused on Vlahovic. They were like, we want Vlahovic. They were obsessed. It's like a little kid. You tell a little kid to get away from his new toy, and he'd be like, he tries best to not get away.
You're going with that for a sec.
Get away from that Serbian man.
But yeah, I think with January, the Vlahovic situation dominated things so heavily, in terms of what they wanted to get. And as I've discussed before, we didn't bid for him because we just couldn't break, he didn't want to come. We couldn't convince him that Arsenal was the right place. When he came out with that comment that he didn't know about Arsenal's interest, I mean, that was a lot of BS if I've ever heard it before in my life. That obviously he knew about Arsenal's interest. Arsenal could never convince the guy to come. and so they were never going to bid
They
for him. With
convinced the club.
Rafinha,
It's this funny stigma about Italian players not leaving Italy that I don't understand at all. Because Tammy Abraham went from England and Italy to Italy, and he isn't doing badly at all. So I just feel like the stigma about Italian players leaving Italy. I hope Gianluca
Vlahovic
Scamacca
not Italian.
For
though.
me, it's Italian
Sorry?
clubs dealing with
It's
Italian clubs.
I think it's also Italian players. I do think that there is a thing about Italian players don't tend to like to leave Italy. The difference with Scamacca is, of course, he came through at PSV, so he's got that experience of playing abroad. The thing is, I don't think Arsenal are going to go out and sign another striker after Jesus.
No, I'm not talking about Arsenal. I'm just giving an example. I'm just saying that,
You're saying generally.
Yeah. And I also feel that the Kroenke, not only in terms of money, I feel like sometimes they've got the decisions wrong with the hierarchy, with who they've given the money to spend, or who's been allotted this money. It's like saying that you could give a dumb guy 500 million and he'd probably go and gamble it in the casino, but you could give a smart guy maybe like 1 million, and that guy could go and make an investment that becomes into 500 million. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I feel like they gave the money to the wrong people. They gave the money to people who had been failing since so many years,
Like
Raul Sanlai is no stranger to the club. Raul Sanlai is he's no stranger to the club. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the difference between a good owner and a bad owner. It isn't always about money and about decisions. It's about who you put in charge to make those decisions.
Exactly.
And there's no question that KSE has a few rounds of making those wrong decisions, and it is appearing.
I think
as
it's a
though they've
pattern
now made the right one.
I think it's a pattern we see with their other sports ventures as well. I think it was the Colorado Rapids, or it was one of their teams that they basically hired. It was a very similar story to Arsenal's, a team that used to consistently do well but never win, and they used to be satisfied with the mediocrity. So I mean, I'm just saying that I think that the Kroenkes have made mistakes in the past, and I agree. I'm the first one to admit that. But at the same time, I feel like they're trying to change, and I can see them trying to take owners this summer. Not necessarily Stan, because it looks like he doesn't even give a shit about the club. But
he's not the owner of Arsenal Football Club. I mean, let's stop talking about Stan. He's irrelevant at this point.
Josh is the one.
I agree. No, but I feel like Josh, not only Josh, I feel like now what's happening is that they're actually going and saying that, before preseason starts, we're going to get our signings in and, get them embedded into the squad so we don't start the season off like last year. I see Tom mentioning that every day, saying that, last year we started the season off so badly. You're talking about January, John. You're talking about January. What if we won the first game? What if we won the first game last year? Against.
No, and that's a fair point. If we'd have got our business done before the season started, we could have beat Brentford. There is obviously a big point to say we lost half.
I don't think there's one thing that you can look back in time and point to. It's an amalgam of different things, mistakes, triumphs.
Exactly, it's a series of events.
And I 100% agree with you. And I'm not saying that the fact that we didn't get top four was directly attributable to the fact that we didn't sign in January. However, I think one of them is that we didn't strengthen in January.
I think the Kroenkes are very bad at man management as well, because you look at people who we had at our club. When we look at Mesut Ozil and Alexis Sanchez, we had an opportunity to give, I think, one of them a contract, and one of them had to go, right? That was what was being talked about. They didn't give it to anyone.
Sorry, Joe, we lost you for a second there. Keep going.
No, I was saying that we had an opportunity to give either Alexis Sanchez or Mesut Ozil a contract one of the summers, and we didn't give either of them a contract, so they both landed up in their last 6 months. And then
we did extend Ozil though.
No, we did extend Ozil, but we extended him when he had 2 or 3 months left on his contract. So we had to overpay him. That's my point. My point is that they didn't plan it.
I don't think you could talk to any reasonable Arsenal fan and get them to disagree with you that the way that we handled contract situations for a long time was extremely problematic.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And that's my problem. And I also think that the Kroenkes need to be a little bit more in line, on the same wavelength as the people who are running the club on a day-to-day basis. I feel like there's miscommunication sometimes that I see with Arsenal, that Arsenal want to sign this player, Arsenal want to sign that player. You go back to these Higuain and other deals that just keep this fell through in so many summers. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like as an owner, I wouldn't say obsessed, but you need to love the club. You know what I'm saying? you need to have that kind of that that it's my club at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I understand you own it, but you also love it. Like I feel like that's very important. I feel like someone
And
needs to.
that's been lacking. I think that's been fair to say. That, and obviously
It's
the
an
communication
emotion.
between them and the club and the fans has definitely been something they've tried to. And I say they, I mean Josh specifically, has tried to address. And I think
When Josh said, when Josh was like, "Be excited."
That's the worst impression ever, Jay.
No way.
Your American impression?
We're going to bring our final caller on to today's show, Jay. But thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you, Dom. Thank you, guys. Nice talking to
Thanks,
you.
Josh. Nice to see you, man.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one, mate. Have a good one. Let's bring our final caller on for today's show, and that's Elliot. Elliot, how you doing, mate? You good? You well?
I am well, guys. Finally get to meet you, Tom. I am.
Thanks, man. And Mike and John. Don't forget these two.
Oh no! Hey, listen, I'm not gonna forget him. Mike. We have talked previously on I believe the Highbury Score on a few other places, anyway, a few other chat places. But again,
yeah, man, Elliot, it's nice to put a face to the name.
Finally, there we go. I can see my face. There we go. We'll just turn it down a bit. There we go, and we're good to go. Good.
So tell me where your head's at, Elliot, regarding the ownership, because this is obviously the dominant discussion today, and you're getting the final word on it. So tell me what you've got to say on this.
Okay, well, with the ownership, let me preface that by stating this: the Stanley Cup. I am from Toronto. I'm from Canada. The Stanley Cup to a Canadian, as my American guests would know, is the ultimate prize for sports in this country. So for the Kroenkes to do that is quite impressive from my standpoint, being a Canadian, because again, we here's the thing: we haven't had that cup back in this country for about near 30 years. So
40, I think,
it's about 93 was the last year.
Oh, that's right.
So for them to
which was ironically the last time that the Colorado won it.
There you go. There you go. So for them to actually take a prize championship that Canada covets and wants back badly is quite seismic. So again, well done to the Kroenkes for doing that and doing 2 championships in 2 years. Now getting back to the point, in terms of the ownership, I get the point of the of them, the Kroenkes not wanting to invest as much as they would if they own the club entirely. And I think that's what's coming on now, and that's why you're seeing the added emphasis and the added emphasis on their investment. And the way Mike broke it down on your show, excellent, Mike. It was an excellent show. I had a look at it yesterday. It's excellent viewing. If anybody gets a chance to see it, please do watch the Gooner Talk. They were fantastic. Anyways.
Did you pay this guy, Mike?
I'm going to need to now. I'm gonna have to increase my wage bill.
Yeah. Hope the check's in the mail. Anyway, so just with regards to the Kroenkes and the emphasis, I'm starting to feel the love.
Yeah.
We didn't feel the love before so much, because I don't think it was their team entirely. And now that the team is theirs, we're starting to see investment. We're starting to see the output. We're starting to see the outlay. It's only hoped that outlay is going, to the trophies and the Champions Leagues and us getting back to the status that we were before. Because remember, we're a sleeping giant, and we're upsetting the apple cart that is the Premier League, that so many people were viewing for a time, saying, okay, Arsenal are where they are. They're 6th to 8th. They're not going to challenge any further. And we're starting to see a change in that. We're starting to see, and it's getting a lot of people upset. It's getting a lot of people, less than happy with us doing this. And, you got to give the Kroenkes their, due in terms of giving us the chance to be respectable again.
You look at how much we've spent since 2018, and this summer. Or let's just talk about Arteta. I mean, this summer, based upon what we could be doing, would take his spending over 400 million. Now, it's important to remember that is contextual and relative to Arsenal. In the last 3 years, United have spent 400 million, Spurs have spent 300 million, Chelsea spent 350 odd million in the last 3 years. So it's contextual, but it does show you that the amount of work that's been needed, the amount of money that's had to be spent to overhaul this squad, to take it from what it was, which, let's be all honest, was a not very good team that was obviously regressing to the team that we have now, which is hopefully going in the direction that we want it to and back up towards, the upper echelons of English football and hopefully European football as well. The whole conversation around kind of the owners that we've had today, I think is kind of addressing what the fair criticism is and what the unfair criticism is. And I think that when we talk about investment, we can't really point that finger towards the ownership anymore. But as Mike discussed a second ago, the decision-making and the appointments, especially in executive levels and how long certain things are enabled to go on for, that's where we can talk about criticism. And now we're starting to see things be more proactive. Mike, I feel like you're on the edge of your seat. Go on.
You can always tell when I'm bursting.
I know.
There was a question about 15 minutes ago from King Salt that I'm hoping you can find it and put it up on the screen. It was essentially asking if there was a conflict of interest back before 2018 when there wasn't 100% ownership of the club for Stan Kroenke or KSE. Think about this. People never think about this from the converse view, from the opposite direction. Conflict of interest, no, but yeah, the more money they spent on Arsenal, the more success the club had, the more expensive it would be to buy more shares. That's true, but if the payoff is enough, maybe you do that. But why does nobody ever ask the question, if there was a desire to buy a 100 million pound player in 2016, when Kroenke owned, and I might be a bit off on this, but owned 69% of the company, and Red and White owned 29%, and then there were some individual small time shareholders in there. Kroenke could go ahead and just do that as a majority owner, but if he just puts in his money to do that, don't you kind of want the money to that 100 million to be split between him and Usmanov? Because Usmanov actually will benefit 30% of it. And might there not have been a conflict of interest where Usmanov might have said, I'm not spending 30 million pounds so that you can get 70 million pounds worth richer off of the profits of that, and then use that money to buy me out, and I don't want to buy out. Everyone's saying, why would Kroenke have spent that money to make Usmanov's shares more valuable when he ultimately wanted to buy him out? Why would Usmanov spend any money on or even endorse any money being spent to make the club more valuable, making it harder for him to buy out Kroenke? I mean, people just absolve Alisher Usmanov from this whole situation when they're not telling me that I look like a Yank Jewish version. Well, actually, he might have been. I don't know. But like he's equally as responsible for not spending money during those times. He couldn't have dictated policy, but was Arsenal just going to spend money just out of the Kroenke's pool when 30% of that would go to Usmanov? And then why didn't just Usmanov go out and buy the players he wanted to buy if he really wanted Arsenal to become this super team?
And I kind of mentioned that earlier. I think there was this dialectical tension between Usmanov and Kroenke. And I know there was, because there was and this kind of came to head when they were talking about possibly buying out Usmanov, trying to buy out Kroenke rather, after 2016, 17, around that time. So there's definitely a struggle between those two, right? And it goes both ways. And I think that dialectical tension that we saw between both of them played out in the transfer markets and in the decisions the clubs made. Dialectical tension meaning between two people like butting heads, maybe an argument between both of them.
Well, and it's being pointed out in the chat that
no, Kroenke... I wanted to address this, Mike, because this is the questions. Usmanov wanted to spend,
and he wasn't allowed on the board. That is true.
What people need to understand is if you are not the majority shareholder and you want to become the owner of the club, the best tactic that you can employ is to promise supporters that you are going to do everything that you can to get Arsenal back. And one of the best ways you can do it is say that I want to spend. Go and have conversations with fans when you're in Monaco. As I remember a conversation on a pod a few years ago that happened. And, he's saying he wants to spend. The club won't let him spend. The directors don't want him on the board. Of course he's going to say he's going to want to spend, but the club aren't letting him. Because he's fooled you. He's done the classic, propaganda situation of fooling fans into
crazy.
And now he's finally got his chance to spend at Everton. How's that working out?
No,
That's not
and
working
it's super
out
easy.
very well at all.
And think about Daniel Ek. Everyone wants to talk about him in Spotify. How easy was it to get fans on his side? All he had to do was say, "I'm an Arsenal
to be
fan,
conky.
and I will spend."
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Super easy. Super easy.
And at a time when the Kroenkes were at their most hated.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Charlie
interestingly
says,
enough, if you want to look at if you want to add villains to to how we got in this situation, don't leave Alisher Usmanov off your list, because Kroenke was trying to buy him out essentially from 2011 on, and he resisted. So Kroenke was the owner, but had Usmanov sold in 2012, and I know it's a stretch to believe this, but had Usmanov just gotten out of the way in 2012, maybe we would have seen some of the investment in the club earlier than we ended up seeing it. Maybe not. If you don't believe Kroenke can do a thing right, then you're probably not gonna buy what I've just tried to sell you. But we'll never know. But what we do know is that Usmanov had no path forward to owning the team 100%. I think we can all be thankful now that he didn't end up owning the club 100%. Thank God. But still stuck in there for 5 or 6 years and kept us in this holding pattern. So don't let him off the hook, especially when you see what he's done now.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Elliot, you've jumped on the show, and I'm conscious that Mike's taken up all of your talking time. He does that, you know him by now.
I get it.
On what Mike and John have just said there, how does that where do you sit on the whole Usmanov situation and this idea that, of course he would say these things to supporters to say that he would want to invest, etc., etc.
Exactly. Well, at the heart of all the rich, they want to own whatever they own outright to themselves. They don't want to share unless it favors them financially. And quite simply, at the time with Usmanov being there, it didn't favor them financially to own. That's why they were pressing to own the club on their own. And now that they have it, now you're starting to see investment. Now you're starting to see the pull. But as you say, as Mike alluded to in his show, we finally got rid of the bad contract. We finally got rid of the nonsense that we had to deal with over the years over bad decisions. We got rid of the Ozils. We got rid of the Mustafis and all these bad players who are on our books for years. And now we have the freedom to spend as we wish to spend, but we're spending smartly, which I totally agree with, because we finally have now a management group that are seeing the talent that's out there, and we are going aggressively after them, and it's upsetting a lot of people, and that's what I want to see. I'm here for it. I'm here for it all the time. I'm here for it all day, all week. I'm that whole Rory Jennings video of Jesus, please don't buy.
We have to hijack Jesus. Yeah,
this was on his vacation. He did this on his vacation. He took time out of his spare time to rant at the fact that we have got a great player. And you know what? I love it. I absolutely adore it. I ate that up. Yum yum yum.
We'll dine on your tears.
We'll dine on everyone's tears. Man United are upset. All their supporters are upset. You see, Tottenham are literally saying, we're supposed to be the bigger team. We're supposed to be in Champions League. Well, sorry. We've been in Kings in London for 100 years, and now you're starting to find out the real deal. It is the history of the Tottenham, as they say. Yeah? It is the history of the Tottenham.
Honestly, the amount of backlash I've got from Spurs fans in the last week has just been glorious.
When's the next trolling article coming out, Tom?
The thing is that article was not even designed to provoke any Spurs fans.
That's
it
the
just
beauty.
got 600 plus responses from Spurs. The piece was just about the idea that despite the fact that Spurs got Champions League, if Arsenal end up signing and having a much better window, if you had the choice, if you had the choice between getting Champions League last summer but having a failed window and getting Europa League but having a window that could set you up for the next 5 years, it's no contest. No contest. For Spurs and Arsenal, the reality of winning the Champions League is years and years away at this point. But the reality of having a successful window gets you closer to that end goal than actually qualifying for the Champions League this summer if you have a correlated failed window in conjunction with that. So the idea that this article then got so much hate and responses, I had DMs from Spurs fans and stuff. Honestly, I love it. I just love the fact that Arsenal's winding everyone. We know that things are going well if everyone else is angry. That's a really good barometer of Arsenal's, success so far in the window is that everyone is angry, that the rivals are angry, that Arsenal's biggest haters are angry within their own fan base. That just fuels me with excitement that this is going to be a good summer, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. Elliot, thank you so much, mate, for coming on the show and jumping on for your first time. I think you did fantastically well, and you promoted Mike, which is, he's going to enjoy that very much.
I'm waiting for the check, Mike.
Elliot, thank you so much.
John, Mike, Tom, thank you so much, and we'll speak to you soon.
Absolutely. Smashed it, mate. Have a good one. Massive thank you to Elliot for coming on the show. We're going to be rounding things up very, very shortly. I'd like to take a second to thank my two guests. John, you stuck with me since the start. We've been going for 90 minutes. That's nearly as much as we had to suffer through against Newcastle a fair few weeks back. Think about how long that was. But thanks for coming on, mate. Tell people where they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
At 305cast. You can find me on Twitter. And thanks for having me on. It was good to be back. Talk Arsenal again.
You coming to Baltimore, buddy? Come on.
Me?
Yeah. You coming?
Maybe. Well, I was actually considering going to Orlando, but it's hard to travel. It's hard to travel right now, but I'm going to see what I can do.
All right. Well, there's a hug waiting for you wherever you go.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Not for me. I'm going to pay someone to do it.
No, I broke 2 ribs than you, hopefully. But no, thank you, Mike, for coming on the show and providing the chat box, of course, with plenty of insight on the financial side of things. And do give, of course, that show that you did another shout out.
Yeah, we the Magic Mike. What is it? What did I call it? It was something like Magic Mike shows you the money or something like that.
Yeah.
Basically, a 45-minute answer to the question of where is Arsenal getting all this money from, and it seems to be going over fairly well. It's one of the more popular streams that we put out. And then in just about 2.5 hours, we have a special episode tonight called Jews for Jesus. We have 4 Jews joining us tonight, including myself on the panel. We have Julian Becker, we have Melvin Marks, and James Johnstone. So you'll never see a conglomeration or just a combination of Jewish people all that excited about Jesus at one time, and that's at 10 o'clock tonight.
Make sure you go and check that show out over on the Gooners Pods if that's your thing. But of course, there is a really good explainer video on the channel as well, of course, about where on earth all this money Arsenal have is coming from. Just having a quick check on it now, actually. 3.4 thousand views. I smashed it, Mike. Well done. Good stuff.
I know. I was like, what? I never saw that K appear after a number on the viewer count. It was, it was usually just a 3-digit number, if that. So,
Smashed it, fella. Good stuff. And speaking of Ks, thank you to the 34K of you that are now subbed to the channel that we hit this morning. Really appreciate the continued support on the channel. As always, make sure that you are subscribed to the Gooners Pod and to the Arsenal Miami podcast. You may not see a podcast there, but I don't know, John, you saw this, but when I went on the show, I was asked which 3 Arsenal podcasts I would have to get rid of. And I said the Arsenal Miami podcast because there is no podcast.
Yeah, he said that. He said one other, and then he saved the third one for after we went off the air. So, didn't really answer the question, but
yeah, for sure. For those of you that think you know who that would be, it's probably not actually who you're thinking of.
No.
But no, interesting stuff. Twitter suspension. Anyway, looking forward to seeing what we do in tomorrow morning's 8 a.m. show. It's going to be really interesting to catch up you all on the latest Arsenal news, of course, as always. But yeah, drop us a like, drop us a subscription if you haven't done so already. And thank you for tuning in. And as always, up the Arsenal.